Hi everyone, it's Becky here. Welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel, and today this video is the continuation of my day on Bowen Island. It was a steaming hot day and we spent time hiking, driving around, visiting the beaches and marinas around. So our last stop is the Tunstall Bay beach. So we're just gonna chill here and wait for the sunset. I'm gonna do a double page sketch of the sunset scenery in front of me sitting on a driftwood. So I have a really stretched panorama in front of me, and the panorama format of my 2 square pages is not that wide, so I have to use my pencil to kind of shrink the distances between elements a little bit. And so the proportions, the sizes and placement I'm drawing right now is not exactly the same as reality, and actually it's more interesting than reality. We can always play around with composition and changing the proportions a little bit, being playful. So as you can see, I'm starting to draw these driftwood. This is kind of like a stump on the left side. It adds a really nice sense of weight for this pretty simple landscape. So I just began drawing the outline of these 2 stumps pretty close to each other, and then these grainy textures with very loose swiping lines, almost like a lot of parallel curves. Also kind of like ripples wrapping around the bark of these driftwoods, and also adding some accentuation for the roots area. There's another piece laying horizontally beneath. And yeah, again, as always, starting with the outline and then add the grainy texture. I'm also using a lot of thick lines and tiny little shapes to accentuate the areas, having a little bit of cast shadow on the edges. And some more little abstract outlines of the woods, just focusing on seeing. These are actually pretty fun to draw, and now I'm drawing this line of the bank in the distance. And this part has a little forest with a lot of wild-looking trees. So drawing these twisted shapes of tree trunks and branches spreading out from the trunks. And then the outline of these evergreen trees forming this little isle. So as you can see, I'm mostly just focusing on the outlines and just a little bit of texture and a bit of the tree trunks and branches showing in between the foliage texture. Finishing this horizontal line, which is, I believe, is the horizon, and adding a little boat and a little island popping up, and drawing more. There's a little flatter island over here. Underneath it, there is another little boat with a tall mast. And then keep drawing the contour of the blue mountain ranges in the distance and the isle here in the foreground area, the tip. And then more little boats with nice vertical masts. And just finishing the bottom of the isle there, adding a couple more boats in the distance. These boats are really kind of connecting the whole panorama together with a good balance. Yeah, more boats and masts. Not very quickly done because they're so small, they're in the distance, we don't have to be too detailed. And now I'm drawing these wooden support of a bridge. They're in the distance, aligning on the same horizontal level, a bit of foliage texture for the isle there on the right hand side. And now I'm moving on to the very foreground area. Just a few steps below me are this huge pile of rocks. So here I am actually cheating. I'm not drawing every single rock. I actually omitted a lot of those rocks. It is actually very, very challenging to fit these numerous rocks onto a small page like this without, spending a lot of time measuring. So just let go, just try my best to capture as many rocks as I can. This picture still makes sense with many rocks missing, right? Now I'm just adding some, little textures. So these lines are trying to show the sharp edges of these rocks. At the same time, I'm also using a lot of hatching lines on the bottom part of some of these rocks for more three-dimensionality. And now just drawing these tiny little driftwoods in the distance on the beach there, and some more rocks. Yeah, those rocks are a little far away, they look smaller. And so the change of sizes of these rocks from near to far is actually pretty sudden, not exactly the same as what's in front of me. So I'm just exaggerating a sense of perspective by shrinking the width and number of rocks here, and some more hatching to give a bit more realistic look for these rocks, the roughness of the surface, the sharp edges. Okay, that's very much it for all the rocks. Now adding a tiny little boat there in the distance and some more hills there on the bottom of the mountain there. And there is the sun that's very close to the horizon now, and I need to just hurry up a little bit before it goes down below the horizon. Just quickly using loose wriggly lines to add the ripples of the lapping water. So the ripples are more visible here in the foreground and the middle ground area. In the far distance is a very soft blur of stripes of colors. So for the distance, I'm trying to keep each lapping line a little closer to each other because of perspective. And the lapping water looks wider there in the foreground, and some more mountain ranges along the horizon. Bit of accentuation on the bottom of those mountains. A lot of things are looking more and more like silhouettes right now as the sun is descending towards the horizon. Yeah, just a bit more ripples, and that's it. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors. This painting process is going to be real-time speed. So I started with lemon yellow, a ring wrapping around the sinking sun, and then using the residue of lemon yellow to paint the reflection of the warm yellow right underneath. Yeah, it's aligning on the same vertical level with the setting sun. And now I'm grabbing some fresh orange because the very left and right side of this reflection has a really strong saturated orange. The middle part is more of a lemon yellow and white glare. Yeah, so just using pretty thin brush strokes to get this done, and painting the reflection at the same time, trying to paint the reflection in moving water. So yeah, choppy brush strokes to get the feel. And just smudging with my finger a little bit so the orange and yellow is merging together in a very nice and subtle way. Yeah, and just grabbing some orange to wrap around the outside of the yellow ring. Cleaning my brush and grabbing some super diluted lemon yellow to paint this stripe in the middle of the sky. So I'm trying to capture this current moment. After 5 and 10 minutes, the color scheme is going to be very, very different. And I'm grabbing some leftover orange, super diluted, to add to underneath, and some orange red. Yeah, so I just grabbed some cherry red, mix it with the orange, using this neat, organized, horizontal brush strokes. So most sunset sky, this is actually a very typical sunset sky, contains a lot of horizontal stripes of various colors and different tones as well. So one little tip for you about painting a sunrise or sunset sky is to be aware of the value of that yellow, orange, red, or pink. It's not always a very concentrated kind. So in this case, the yellow and orange for me is more diluted, not super concentrated. So it's more fluid and realistic. And just grabbing some lemon yellow, mix it with a tiny bit of orange, super diluted, to paint the first layer for the sea surface. The sea right now, it has a lot of reflections of the yellow and yellow-orange town. Using a lot of choppy brushstrokes as well. And another tip for you when you're painting a sunrise or sunset sky with water reflections, just start with these warm colors first, and usually in a pretty diluted kind, just playing with lemon yellow and orange. And every few brushstrokes is of a different color or value. And now the sun is getting closer to the horizon. I see some more stronger lemon yellow showing. Yeah, so just grabbing some clean lemon yellow, make it less diluted for the higher part of the sky. As you can see, the paper is a little strange. I think they sprayed too much wax or like protective sheet of chemicals on the surface of this paper here. But okay, I'm just gonna keep going. I just grab a bit of cerulean blue for the very top part of the sky. Yeah, as you can see, the paper is kind of waxy. Alright, so there's no time to feel frustrated, which is to keep painting. So I'm just rubbing a lot on this area to sort of smoothen out the paint butter on this waxy area. I think is a defect on the production line of this company. Okay, so just keep threading this cerulean blue with more smooth horizontal brush strokes, trying to mix this cerulean blue with the yellow to form a little bit of a turquoise in between these two colors. So as I always mentioned in my previous YouTube videos, we don't have to get that perfect color or tone. We can always be playful on paper by mixing two colors, maybe more, together on paper to form a new interesting color. Alright, so that's it for the sky right now. I'm coming back to adding more warm reflective colors on the sea surface. These red oranges close to the horizon, and also on the left and right side of the reflection of the sun. The color is changing to a deeper tone of peachy colors. So yeah, it's very different from about 5 to 7 minutes ago. Alright, so that's very much it for most of the warm colors for this sketch. Now it's time to be brave and bold to paint the greens and turquoise of various values and lively brushstrokes for the surface of the sea. So I'm just grabbing a bit of cerulean blue, mix it with a little bit of cobalt blue and a tiny bit of green. So it's a kind of like a blue turquoise color. As you can see, I'm using slightly different hand pressure holding this brush, and also leaving some clean, almost white gaps in between each brushstroke to create the illusion of moving water. And also now I'm using, kind of residue of this blue turquoise. So the blue in the middle ground in the far distance is of a more fade out tone. The blue is very concentrated underneath those rocks. Yeah, but these ones, I'm trying to use a slightly diluted blue turquoise and also thinner brush strokes because of perspective. Ripples in the far distance, they look much thinner compared to the foreground area. Alright, so now I'm going to take a break from this area of the sea and just grab a little bit of hooker's green, or you can use viridian green to paint this reflective area of the little isle above. Again, using the same technique, using various hand pressure, holding and pushing down the brush, leaving some almost white gaps in between for the illusion of moving water. And now I'm ready to move on to the right hand side page. Yeah, these are very much the same colors. Cobalt blue mixed with cerulean blue and a tiny bit of lime green. Now I also grabbed a little bit of magenta for a little bit of purplish shade, just a tiny bit, especially for the foreground area. The water had a deeper value of blue, purple, and dark turquoise in the foreground. And then starting here in the middle ground, the color looks kind of fade out. And then in the distance, almost invisible. So when you're painting a body of water, just make sure you observe very deeply of the different values or tones of blues, turquoise, and greens. The colors from near to far can be very, very different. Alright, so moving another step further, it's time to shade the foreground lapping water with very bold brushstrokes of blue turquoise. So basically I just mix in a bit of magenta or royal purple into the cobalt and cerulean blue mix. Alright, just so for another layer of sense of depth. Yeah, it's a very deep blue purple. And also layering of various tones of blues and turquoise when painting water is also pretty important. Yeah, and also varying my brushstroke size, shape, and length at the same time. So they're kind of being with each other in harmony, not looking too harsh. And painting a body of water, especially moving seawater, is actually very, very challenging, especially at this time of the day when the lighting condition is very different pretty much like every minute. So I'm trying to capture more than one moment with shifting moments throughout this 30-minute painting session. So just trying to sort of add more strong brush strokes, interrupting the sun's reflection here, and some more on the right hand side of this page spread. While I'm adding this darker value of blue purple, I'm also being aware not to overpaint, to preserve those brightest blues, almost whites, at the highlights of the moving water. Yeah, so my brush stroke and also it's the same color, but it's more diluted for the lapping water there in the distance. Following the rule of perspective, things in the distance, they look less clear, smaller and thinner. And just taking my time, being mindful of each brushstroke that I'm laying on paper here. Yeah, keeping the distant lapping water pretty thin and the diluted version of the blue purple. And I actually found the sunset beach scenery to be easier to paint because there's so much contrast going on here at the end of the day compared to midday, where there's actually very least amount of contrast. Everything is of the same flat value. So now around the end of the day, I see a lot of strong tones and many almost silhouette shapes like the mountains and the isles in the distance, and also the rocks has very strong contrast as well. So everything together is forming a really dramatic visual effect here. And just keep adding these very tender renderings with my medium tip water brush, and just keeping this blue tone pretty diluted, especially for these areas there in the far distance. Every single brush stroke is a little personal sensation. Feeling the turbulence of the water in front of me, trying to capture the movement. It's just impossible to copy, but I'm just trying to capture the spirit of the moving water under the setting sun. So even though the water is moving every single second, we should just calm down and just pay attention to the general rhythm that's there. Okay, so now I want to paint the intense reflection of the isle here on the very right hand side, using very intense, almost black colors. So this one I mix in even more purple or magenta into the cobalt blue and cerulean blue mixture. and using very thin brush strokes for the distance and the middle ground area. For the foreground area, a little thicker and longer brush strokes. This is the perspective of reflections. Yeah, the reflections of on water, it looks wider here in the foreground compared to the distant area, both horizontally and vertically. Alright, so now I want to intensify the reflection of the aisle over here on the very left hand side using a more intense green. So this is very much Hooker's green containing less water. That's the trick of creating contrast in watercolors. We could just stick with the same few number of colors, just play around with water control and create a bunch of different tones. Alright, just a few more intense brush strokes for the lapping water here close to the rocks. So the colors of a sunset scenery, it changes every minute. So sometimes I feel like it changes every few seconds now. The color of this reflection here, it looks so much more intense than before, containing more orange and orange-red colors. So yeah, just adding my retouches. This is a mix of orange and red. Again, preserving the very middle part of this reflection with the bright shine of the sun itself, and just the glow that has this orange-red tone. And tiny bit of grayish shadows for those bumpy islands there in the distance, using bit of leftover bluish gray on my brush tip to get it done right underneath the horizon line, and grabbing some diluted red orange, super impressionistic brush strokes to add on to here and there. There's so much charm right now that I see both in the sky and on the surface of the sea as time is passing and the sky is evolving with a new color scheme. And the red-pink color close to the horizon is even more intense now. So I'm just being really bold, grabbing some cherry red from my palette and not over diluting it, just kind of spread it as always, using horizontal brush marks. And also cleaning my brush to soften the edges of the brush marks, so it's merging nicely with the previous layer. And just wetting the middle part of the area, sky area with a little clear water, and I just want to add a stronger layer of lemon yellow right here. Okay, and spread it out in very long horizontal brush marks. Now it's time to let go of the sky and the sea area. It's time to paint the mountains and the isles in the distance and also in the middle ground over here. So I'm just wetting those areas with clear water. Grabbing a little bit of lime green and a bit of lemon yellow to start with the first layer for this isle here with a lot of wild looking evergreen trees. Playing with a ratio of lime green and lemon yellow, yellow ochre. At the same time, I'm also blending on some Hooker's green. To save time here, I'm really playing a lot with kind of like a little crazy wet onto wet blending of several colors. Okay, so I'm gonna get those blending colors to dry off a little bit. Now I want to paint the first layer for the isle here on the right hand side using very much the same color recipe, playing with about 4 different colors. Lime green, Hooker's green, yellow ochre, a little bit of lemon yellow. So there are like a couple or 3 layers of trees overlapping each other. So the values or the tones of green is different from layer to layer. All right, so now coming back to the left side over here, just adding a little bit of red and brown. Yeah, the color here is a little crazy because the sunset red is reflecting so strongly onto the rocks over here on the bottom of the aisle here. Yeah, so that's why I put a bit of juicy red right there. You know, things in the environment, they're always affecting each other, projecting colors, reflecting colors onto each other. And for the mountain ranges in the distance is a mix of cerulean blue and cobalt blue, diluted with a little water. I think the more far away the mountain is, the more diluted look that blue seemed to be. Okay, and just skipping around, those bumpy mountains there in the middle, they're very much like almost black silhouettes. This mountain here still had a pretty nice blue tone. This one contains more cobalt blue, especially for the bottom, has a little bit transitions of two kinds of blues at least. And the bottom of this mountain here is a little bit foggy, caused by the atmosphere. So when we're painting mountains, try not to make it look way too solid. Pay attention to the slight bit of transitions caused by the atmosphere, sometimes by fog. And for this color is an almost black color that I mix blue, green, and a little bit of royal purple into a super deep gray. For these two little islands there floating in the middle, caused by this sunset lighting condition, these two, they're looking very much like silhouettes, adding a really nice drama to this landscape. So the values of these mountains, islands, and isles are looking so much more interesting compared to midday when the sun is right in the middle, shining like 90 degrees down and making everything looking flat, having the same value of greens. Okay, and now it's time to add a little bit of contrast for these two isles, balancing the left and right side of this sketch. So this layer of green is more intense, is burnt sienna mixed into Hooker's green. Just for the top part of these trees that I see is a darker value, having a really soft transition down towards the middle and bottom. And just using these choppy brushstrokes to depict the texture of these wild looking trees. And just let it breathe in between the lighter values of green underneath. Yeah, and same for this part of the aisle as well, starting with the top part. What I'm seeing right now is the top part of these trees are having a darker value. The bottom is a little foggy looking. Alright, so that's it for the middle ground area. Now it's time to paint the foreground area with a lot of warm yellows, reflecting the colors from the sunset sky. So this is very much yellow ochre with a tiny bit of orange diluted. Yeah, especially for these rocks. These rocks are looking so beautiful and gorgeous, catching the luminosity from the sunset sky. And same for the driftwood. Everything here in the foreground needs this glaze of yellow-orange. And the reflective yellow-oranges on these two large driftwoods are so intense. So it's a less diluted yellow-orange. Yeah, and just spread it out very lightly for most of the areas here in the foreground. Alright, so after this first layer, it's time to paint the contrast. So to make a bright, beautiful world, we can't just use bright colors. We need to use these intense and dark colors to make those bright areas shine even better. So this is a mix of burnt sienna with a little bit of cobalt blue. So cobalt blue can always intensify brown or burnt sienna. And using these pretty loose, choppy, and longer brush strokes to get the texture of wood, the grainy texture. And just putting on this mid to dark brown here. I also mix in a bit of raw umber into the burnt sienna to get a colder brown for this stump over here as well. Trying to blend it with the golden orange brown, mostly on the top and right hand side. Okay, so a pretty good transition, pretty simple and nice transition here. Now I'm going to use this very much the same color, the brown, for the right side, those tiny little driftwoods in the distance on the beach. I also mixed in a little bit of cobalt blue to intensify or to shade the brown even further. Yeah, cobalt blue mixed into the leftover brown to get a super intense, a brownish dark gray for these rocks. As I'm painting these rocks with this very simple technique, I'm just being aware not to overpaint. The top and the left side of many of these rocks are shining bright of the luminosity from the sunset sky. And this technique I'm using right now is wet on to dry. So the previous layer of the diluted yellow-orange is all dried. It's an extremely hot day, and the paint just takes just a couple minutes to dry. And it's actually easier for this technique to work. Yeah, just keep spreading this out. I also mix in a little bit black because some of these rocks are actually super intense and black is super effective. So sometimes I do like to use black. For example, painting Dudu's black fur. Yeah, mixing burnt sienna with black just so it's convenient to get a strong sense of weight for these foreground rocks. As I always mentioned in my previous videos, foreground elements, they deserve more renderings and more weight. And not all of these shaded areas are completely solid dark brown. As you can see, I'm using little brush strokes to get some of the gaps unpainted for some reflective light on those areas. It's jutting out a bit more. Very sharp edges sticking out from the surface. And very intense around the deep down, the corner areas on the bottom part of many of these rocks. And I just love the lighting condition right now. The sun is really, really low, super close to the horizon. When a light source is very low and the light is projecting onto the objects, it's so dramatic and full of contrast, as I mentioned before. And it's actually easier to paint compared to midday. And I just grab a little bit diluted yellow and yellow-orange, these super vibrant colors reflected onto the edges of these rocks here in the middle. And just very gently rubbing around some little bits of reflective colors onto these rocks and the driftwoods, almost invisible brush marks. I like to do this around the last stage of my paintings, just to slow down a little bit and trying to figure out other colors that I need to add on to. Yes, I think I need more contrast for the left side of these two driftwoods. So I'm just using this blackish brown that I mix burnt sienna with black, and using these thin brush strokes to further exaggerate the grainy texture. Yeah, and same for this one here, because these two are in the foreground. They deserve more renderings and sharp detailing. And the sun is very much disappearing down the horizon now, and all of a sudden everything is looking so much darker than before. And wow, what a great time I've spent on this beach over here. I feel like I've spent here for like a very, very long time, more than just 1 hour. So I just used a little bit of leftover green to paint a little wildflower sticking out in between the rocks there. And I just finished my painting as the sun is all gone below the horizon. Wow, what a great timing. So here's my finished sketch. It took me exactly 60 minutes to do it, the drawing and painting part. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. Thank you for your patience watching it all the way through. And if you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. It's summertime now. I'm going on a lot of day trips, and I'll upload several new videos every week. Painting in nature is truly a meditative experience and is really healing for our bodies and souls. So I really recommend you to sketch and paint as much as you can from real life observations and not relying too much on photos. And now it's time to catch the last ferry home back to West Vancouver and then drive home. Here's our ferry. We're getting on again, and everything looks so different compared to daytime. And it's so quiet here on board. Not many people are taking the last ferry.
Remember, thank you and safe travels.
And I just want to get some fresh air here on deck. This is the vehicle deck, but we're free to walk around. And it's the last light of the day here. It's so great to get some fresh wind and air after a really steaming hot day. And West Vancouver is not far away. It's another 20-minute ferry ride back to West Vancouver. It's such a unique and memorable experience to sketch on location and taking that visual memory back with you home. So now you can stick around a little bit more to see how the vehicles are disembarking from the ship. So here is this little bridge connecting the land and the ship. So all the foot passengers get to go first. All the vehicles leave after the foot passengers. Here we go. It's time to go home. It's about another 1 hour drive from West Vancouver back home. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. I will see you around very soon next time. Have a great, wonderful, enjoyable summer with your family and friends.